It was a time when the mere mention of RadioShack ignited sparks of excitement among tech enthusiasts and curious minds alike. It was where innovation thrived, circuitry dreams came to life, and gadgets whispered future promises. However, in a world teeming with technological progress, the decline of RadioShack from its electrifying peak to a perplexing low point is a story worth delving into. We'll tell you right now, it's astonishing that its downturn didn't knock them out sooner. They resemble a boxer who has been absorbing blows since the opening bell, and strangely, they're still on their feet. However, it seems the knockout blow couldn't be too distant. Their decline has captivated us in no time. But before we explore, smash the subscribe button and ring the notification bell. The organization was established as far back as 1921 by a pair of siblings in Boston and, as the name suggests, they specialized in selling radio equipment. At that time, it bore an identical name to its present one, but RadioShack was composed of two separate words during that era. In 1995, they made a significant change by transitioning their logo from two different words to a single word, which likely triggered a minor adjustment in the company's name. However, this transformative shift began in the early 1920s, and the company enjoyed success for the subsequent 4 decades. It embarked on expansion ventures, constructing prominent store locations. Nevertheless, by the early 1960s, RadioShack had already encountered challenges. One of the most significant shifts likely revolved around transitioning to more compact store venues. The rationale behind this decision was to gain insights into their top-selling products and exclusively feature those items, while the ones with weaker sales figures were essentially occupying valuable space without delivering substantial benefits. This strategy appeared to yield positive results. In conjunction with various other adjustments, these alterations played a pivotal role in rescuing the store and restoring it to a favorable position. In the 1970s, the popularity of CB radio surged, and unsurprisingly, this trend proved beneficial for RadioShack. Charles Tandy sadly passed away in 1978, but RadioShack continued to be under the ownership of the Tandy Company. During the 1990s, a strategic shift occurred as RadioShack reduced its emphasis on radio and electronic components while increasing its focus on popular electronic consumer goods. They made a significant foray into cell phone sales during this period. However, their decline began around the early 2000s, and unfortunately, RadioShack never managed to bounce back from this downturn. RadioShack's ongoing decline mirrors the downward trajectory they experienced in the past, which is quite astonishing. They have consistently declined for over 15 years, yet they somehow managed to remain in business. They ventured into partnerships with cell phone companies, established kiosks, and underwent a rebranding effort referring to themselves as The Shack within Target stores. RadioShack pursued various strategies throughout this period, but unfortunately, none of these initiatives could reverse their fortunes. While some actions provided short-term benefits, most ultimately proved detrimental in the long run. If we were to identify a specific year when things took a drastic turn for the worse for RadioShack, 2012 stands out as a significant turning point. In 2011, they recorded a $72 million profit, but by 2012, they had plummeted into a staggering $139 million loss. The financial woes continued the following year with a devastating $400 million loss. Negative profits signify that RadioShack was not generating sufficient income to sustain its operations. They likely had to seek external funding sources to keep their business afloat, often resorting to loans or other financial assistance. RadioShack secured a substantial $250 million loan from a lender known as Salus. However, one of the conditions attached to this loan was that RadioShack committed not to close more than 200 stores in a single year without obtaining approval from Salus. Typically, when companies face financial losses, a common strategy is to pinpoint the stores that are incurring the highest losses and close them down. This action makes logical sense because by closing unprofitable stores, a company may eliminate the associated losses, which theoretically should lead to an immediate improvement in overall profitability. This practice is a well-known strategy employed in the business world. When RadioShack faced the inevitable need to shutter some of its stores, the decision to grant Salus such influential authority seemed rather ill-advised. However, it's crucial to remember that RadioShack was already mired in a dire financial predicament, making it imperative to secure this funding to sustain its day-to-day operations. Radio Shack's survival was hanging in the balance, and it's pretty plausible that they might have faced bankruptcy if they hadn't secured this loan. They were essentially left with no alternative but to accept these terms due to their dire straits. Moving forward, Radio Shack found itself hemorrhaging money at an alarming rate and was in a dire need of initiating store closures to regain some financial stability. Salas remained steadfast in preventing Radio Shack from pursuing this course of action. He held the belief that it wasn't the right strategy to adopt. Nevertheless, Radio Shack had valid reasons to assert that they had an excess of stores, often situated close to each other, effectively cannibalizing their customer base. In early 2015, Radio Shack filed for bankruptcy, paving the way for a significant restructuring of its operations. Following this financial setback, the company swiftly unveiled plans to shut down approximately 1,800 retail outlets. Shortly after the bankruptcy declaration, Radio Shack found a lifeline in the form of a corporate entity named Standard General, which stepped in to acquire the struggling electronics retailer. Adding to the already tumultuous situation, Radio Shack found itself in financial distress earlier this year, prompting the company to file for bankruptcy again. As if the previous challenges weren't enough, Radio Shack has closed an additional 1,000 stores, leaving only a mere 70 locations in operation. While there may be a slim chance that a handful of these locations would endure, it's safe to say that Radio Shack has essentially exited the daily lives of most consumers. Thus, the question of what went wrong still exists. Over the past few years, everything has grown out of control. However, how did they get to that point? Here are two factors that we believe played a significant role in Radio Shack's downfall, and we acknowledge that management issues were a primary concern. During a troubling 10-year span, they frequently rotated CEOs, with new leadership emerging every year or two. While this frequent turnover isn't a direct cause, it reflects deeper underlying issues within the company. Eventually, it becomes a cause, but we exclude it from our top two list. Another significant contributor to Radio Shack's decline was its unpreparedness for the internet era. The internet had a more detrimental impact on Radio Shack compared to many other companies, and this was due to several factors. One notable reason was their delay in embracing the digital age. Almost every retail store now offers its products online. If you think of any retailer, just visit their website and you'll likely find their products available. This trend has been prevalent for approximately 2 decades. However, for Radio Shack, their transition to online sales took place about a decade ago, marking a significant delay in adapting to the changing retail landscape. The well-suited products for online sales typically don't require physical inspection before purchase. Radio Shack primarily dealt with such items, making them ideal for online retail. Radio Shack's reputation as a relatively small retailer further emphasized the advantage of transitioning to online sales. Radio Shack is the kind of store where you can quickly grab what you need, and the internet appears to be an ideal platform for most retailers, but it's especially fitting for Radio Shack. However, they missed the opportunity to embrace online sales for years, and as a result, they endured the consequences of this delay. Reason 2 is somewhat a follow-up to Reason 1, but it revolves around the nature of their products. When we consider everything, we must ask, is there anything Radio Shack sells that we wouldn't want to purchase elsewhere? For us, the answer is no. Currently, Radio Shack is over. They lasted almost 100 years, and they might perhaps surpass that milestone. Despite a 20-year downturn, 2 bankruptcies, and financial difficulties more than 50 years ago, they have survived. However, if somebody is viewing this, they might as well disappear if you're one of the fortunate few who reside close to one of those 70 places. Despite its struggles, Radio Shack survived for nearly a century, enduring financial difficulties, 2 bankruptcies, and numerous challenges. However, with the closure of most of its stores, it has essentially faded from the daily lives of most consumers. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you can stay updated with more insightful content.